Welcome to another episode of the Raw Paleo Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Emmanuel Zuckerman, and in today's episode, I'm going to spitball about the idea that humans are not hunter and gatherers, but rather scavenger and gatherers. And here we are talking evolutionarily, not in terms of our current lifestyle, which is neither hunter gatherer nor scavenger, but rather farmer, or even if you're in a city, supermarket gatherer. Traditionally, we see all sorts of illustrations of human bands hunting mammoths and other big game, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting that actually we are scavengers, perhaps more like crows and ravens. So here are a few ideas in this direction. First of all, scientists now postulate that a large portion of our diet consisted of coming up to carcasses after the big cats and the other large predators got to them, and then getting the bone marrow and other various things that those cats wouldn't touch. In other words, we are scavenging after the big predators are finished feeding. Or perhaps we come at them as a band or throw rocks at them and chase them away from the carcass. Another interesting piece of evidence is that we all age our meat. All the meat in the markets has been aged, none of it is fresh. Obviously, if we had a taste for fresh meat, then why would anyone go through all the trouble of aging it? Another piece of evidence is that scientists have found some isotopes that are present in rotten meat in our ancestors, implying that they ate a lot of rotten meat. Other similar pieces of evidence is that they've found bone marrow being hung in caves to age for a time of need. They found all sorts of preserved carcasses underwater, in holes, and so on and so forth. And perhaps the most instructive, which I'll now go into details, is the Eskimos, the Inuit. The Eskimos are a very instructive people, a very instructive use case for raw eaters. Besides subsisting almost solely on raw meat throughout the year due to the weather, they would also preserve and age many of their kills. They might bury a walrus for a year, or they might stuff some seal with birds and age that for a long time. And you can find many of these various recipes online. And they consider it a great delicacy to eat these fermented meats. These fermented meats are usually referred to as high meat, presumably because by eating these, you get a certain high. This is a bit similar to how fermenting grapes results in wine, which makes people drunk. Before I go into more details about high meat, there are a lot of recipes out there in the world of fermented meats. You can learn more about those by going online. There are fermented fish sauces, there's fermented milks of all sorts, which of course include cheese and yogurts, and even the ancient Romans used to ferment fish in a sauce called garum. Now, going back to high meat, this is actually something that a lot of people in the diet like to eat, and the basic method is to take some piece of meat or perhaps an organ like liver, chop it up, place it in a jar that's sealed, ideally glass jar, and then put it in the refrigerator and air it out frequently, which is said to be at least once in 3 days. In time, and here we mean perhaps weeks, perhaps months, you have to judge it via experience. The meat will ferment and start liquefying, and then it is ready to be eaten. Now, just like cooking can get very complicated and subtle, the same applies to preparation of high meat. You can stir or not stir, pour out liquids or not pour out liquids, decide that you don't want to refrigerate at the cost of having to air it more frequently. You might want to put it in some medium, say some leaves, and then bury it underground. There are all sorts of variations, but this is the basic idea. And before doing any of this, you should get very, very educated on this to make sure you don't unintentionally poison yourself by getting botulism. Now, high meat Preparation is not for everyone. You also need to be cognizant of where you are preparing it. If you live with other people that aren't sharing your dietary views, you should think twice about doing it. The odor is very strong, and most people can't tolerate it. On the other hand, there is a lot of research suggesting that high meat provides a huge number of benefits. You can think of it as probiotics. All sorts of bacteria, fungi inhabit the meat, pre-digest it for you, and when you eat it, they get incorporated into your gut, and that improves your own digestive system. There's also research that suggests that this method of preservation of meat retains certain molecules like vitamin C. So, in terms of health benefits, high meat comes highly recommended by those who have looked into it.